Today we're going to talk about combining knitting and purling in two really simple ways. The first way is to knit a row and then purl a row. This gives you a really nice smooth fabric on one side and a bumpy fabric on the other side. The other method we're going to talk about is combining knitting and purling within a row. Specifically, we're going to do a knit one, purl one ribbing. To begin, make a slip knot and then long tail cast on until you get to 15 stitches. Now that I've got my 15 stitches, I've put the needle full of stitches into my left hand and I'm going to get ready to knit. I'm going to begin by just knitting an entire row. So go ahead and work a knit row all the way across. I've just finished my knit row, so now I'm going to turn around and see what I have here. I'm already starting to see these little horizontal purl bumps. Now for the next row I'm going to purl, and I know that I'm going to purl because I see those purl bumps here. So for the next row, go ahead and get your yarn in front and get ready to start purling. I just finished up my purl row, so I'm going to switch hands again, but before I keep going, I'm going to kind of pull this out to look at it. So now I'm on the side that is nice and smooth. This is the knit side. I know I need to knit when I get to the side because if I pull down here, I can see those nice knitted V's. Now we're just going to continue in this manner, knitting one row and then purling one row. Now I'm going to keep doing that for a little bit and I can show you exactly what it's going to look like. Now I've completed a few more rows of knit a row and purl a row, and you can really start to see these stitches take shape. Here I am on the knit side, and I know that I'm on the knit side because it's nice and smooth and I can see my knitted V's. And here is the purl side, and I know that it's a purl side because I can see the bumps and I can see the horizontal purl stitches. This is called stockinette stitch, when you knit a row and then purl a row. So now we're about to begin the really fun part where we're going to combine knit and purl stitches within the same row. So make sure you're back to the smooth knit side before we begin. So now we're going to start knitting and purling within the same row, and we're going to do this with a simple knit one, purl one ribbing. So we're going to start with knitting, so go ahead and knit that first stitch, slide it off the needle. Now we need to purl this next stitch here, but the problem is our yarn is in the back. All we need to do is bring it in front of that left-hand needle. We're just going to flip it over and bring it in front of that left-hand needle. As you get more comfortable, you'll be able to make that flip just with your left hand there. All right, now that the yarn is in the front, let's purl this next stitch and slide it off. Now we're going to repeat that. We're going to knit one and purl one. So our problem is our yarn is in the front again, so we just need to simply flip it over to the back so that we can knit this next stitch. And then again, we're going to purl, so we just need to get that yarn into the front of the left-hand needle, and we can purl. As you pull your purl stitch off, you can almost just let that yarn fall in the back so that it's ready to knit the next stitch. You're just going to alternate between knitting and purling all the way to the end of the row. I'm at the end of my row and I just finished by working a purl stitch. I can see that horizontal bump here. And I only have one stitch remaining. Now that was intentional. I started my row with knit and I'm going to end it with knit. Since I have an odd number of stitches, my knit one, purl one repeat ended right before the last stitch, so that I can end with a knit stitch. So just flick that yarn into the back and then you can end by knitting one. Now we're going to flip back over to the other side so we can begin our second row. So since that last row ended with a knit one, our next row is going to start just the opposite with a purl one. So make sure this stitch on the end is flipped down nicely there, and we're going to begin this row with a purl one. So go ahead and make your purl stitch. Then flip your yarn into the back because our next stitch here is a knit stitch. And if I pull down really hard on it, I can actually see that knitted V right there. So go ahead and knit that next stitch. Bring your yarn forward to purl the next stitch. And again, just go back and forth all the way to the end of the row. I'm at the end of the row and I just finished working a knit stitch here. Now since this row started with purl, I'm going to end with purl. My repeat was a purl one, knit one, and now I'm one stitch away from the end. So I'm going to go ahead and bring my yarn forward and end this row with a purl. Now I'm going to flip back over to the right side so we can see what is going on here. We've only done 2 rows, but you can kind of start to see this pattern taking shape. I can see my knit stitches are the ones that look like V's, and I can see my purl stitches are these little bumps in between. So let's work a few more rows of knit one, purl one to see what it's going to look like. Now I've worked just a couple more rows of that knit one, purl one ribbing, and you can really start to see the ribbing taking shape. So if I kind of spread things out, I can see I have my knit columns. The knit columns are the ones that look like V's and they sort of protrude forward. My purl columns are right next door. The purl columns are those horizontal little bumps and they sort of recede into the ribbing. Ribbing is one of those stitches that clings in on itself, so it's really good for the cuffs of socks or the starts of sweaters, necks of sweaters, things like that. There's one more interesting thing I wanted to show you about combining knitting and purling. If we look back down here at our stockinette portion, I know that I have knits on my right side and purl bumps on my wrong side. That's true with my ribbing as well. If I pick out this column of knit stitches here, I'm going to hold on to that stitch, flip things around. Here's my same stitch here. It was knit on one side and it's a purl column on the other side. Knit and purl are just each other's opposites. Now you know how to combine knitting and purling with the stockinette stitch and a 1x1 ribbing. The only thing left you have to learn for basic knit stitches is the bind off. You can find the bind off video below.